Saudi Arabia, because you said that's one of your latest contracts. So I was really interested to know, because Saudi Arabia has just recently opened up their country as of last year for tourism, and they've been quite a closed society and a very rich society. So we don't really want to go into the politics of it, like you said, but the fact that you're working out there and moving away from governance, but just touching on COVID-19, what's their response, and how are they dealing with the health and safety aspects of it from the point that you're now delivering a major project in their territory?
Well, let me tell you, when I sort of took the first contract to go out to Saudi at the beginning of January, I really didn't know what to expect, and expected, I was thinking that there would be policemen everywhere and people watching you and all the rest of it. It's not like that at all, and it is a relatively open society. But as you rightly say, there are only a couple of years sort of gone by since the government have sort of begun to open up society and allow a certain amount of freedom, which is absolutely great. But of course, as soon as COVID reared its ugly head, you saw immediately how simple it was, with no arguments, for the government to say, we were at work one afternoon, and we got a message from our client to say that from tomorrow there's going to be a curfew in place from 7 in the evening till 6 in the morning. So, we were finishing work at 7 in the evening. All of a sudden, we're finishing work at 5:30 so that everybody can get back to their accommodation before the curfew happens. And let me tell you, those first few nights, all I heard all night long were sirens, because every kind of policeman that they'd got in Jeddah was out catching people still driving around, because their society is not necessarily as well developed as things are in Europe. And yes, of course, there's a certain level of society that are tuned into modern social media and TV and all the rest of it. But at the opposite end of the scale, there's a whole chunk of the population that don't even own a radio or a TV and didn't perhaps even know that this curfew was in place. That all having been said, within 7 to 10 days, that 7 at night till 6 in the morning curfew became 3 in the afternoon till 6 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And at that same point, they said to us, look, you can't work any longer. So we all packed up and sat in our hotels. And then more rules came in, like restaurants were closing, that kind of thing. So we were pretty much stuck in our rooms, living on room service for a couple of weeks. And but then this is where the cultural, the sort of thing the thing happened there. Our client, who the company is part owned by the government, suddenly said, right, we have permits for you to be able to come back to work, but your workforce has to be reduced by 60%. You have to have social distancing in place. We have to carry out medical checks on everybody before they arrive at work each day, that kind of thing. But it suddenly meant that we were able to continue working. Now, I'm not convinced that would have happened in UK had we been under such strict sort of controls. But that's an example of the way life and culture in Saudi Arabia can work perhaps a little bit to your advantage. Now, let me tell you that when we first started back to work again, before we got sort of signs to put in cars and that kind of thing, I can recall one evening, one team coming to work having been stopped by the police on four separate occasions because they were out in this kind of ghost city that was Jeddah at the time.
Right.
However, everything did settle down, and I took the opportunity, along with the other Brits that I had working with me, to take a repatriation flight and come back to UK, because we were concerned about the situation as it was in Jeddah, but also about the situation back in UK, and with wives and family and things like that back here. And everything looking a bit bleak, I thought that it was morally important to be home with my family rather than doing the work in Jeddah. Having said all that, COVID-19 levels in Saudi Arabia and in Jeddah in particular have been incredibly low by comparison to what we've suffered in UK. And to a certain extent, things have relaxed for my team while the pandemic has gone on, and we've now got almost a full scale of people back at work. They're all working nights only, so we run a shift from 7 in the evening till 4 in the morning, excuse me, and things are going quite well, but people have got used to the social distancing, the wearing masks, the general levels of hygiene, that kind of thing, and it is very much helped by the fact that the government in Saudi are still, to a certain extent, relatively autocratic, and when they say something happens, people don't tend to question it the way they do in the Western world. So I think that the way in which the spread of the disease over there has been curtailed is because people do tend to do what they're told rather than having huge private parties and going to the beach and all the different things that we've seen in this country over.
Going down. Was it Bournemouth? I think they all rushed to.
Well, for some strange reason, Bournemouth, and of course a big chunk of my family live down there, and they've been hostages in their own homes for a certain amount of time because nobody wanted to go out because there were people all over the place.
So when you said when you came back to the UK, were you required to be tested? Because I know you said when you left, when you go back to Saudi Arabia, you have to be tested every day, and when you arrive off the plane at the airport, you have to be screened.
I found it frightening, really. It was a flight organised by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office from Jeddah. I have to say they did an absolutely fantastic job. They had coach services from all over the sort of west and north of Saudi Arabia, bringing Brits or people with British passports into Jeddah for flights. When you got on the plane, everybody had to wear a mask. You got on the plane, there were only people sitting in every other seat. Mm-hmm. So it was, in a bank of 3, there was only 2, one on the inside and one on the outside, that kind of thing. We arrived in UK. And apart from the fact that, it's the first time I've ever flown into Heathrow and not had to circle London for about half an hour, we just came straight in, parked, walked through an absolutely empty airport and got to passport control, where one guy from the border force turned up and said, "Just remember to keep 2 meters apart." And we promptly wandered through border control and were allowed out into society. That was it.
Yeah,
that was absolutely it, and that was a bit worrying, really, because there were still lots and lots of flights. Although it was relatively quiet when I came in, by comparison to the way Heathrow normally is, it was quiet. But there's still lots of flights coming in from all over the world, and people just getting off the flights and dispersing into British society.
And that's what I said. I know you said try not to lay too much blame on the government, where some countries had a complete lockdown on flights coming into their country, and people who did come into the country had to go through the testing, or they had to be screened and give their details where they're going to stay. And from my knowledge, I think we've only introduced that relatively late on in the whole 3 months of lockdown through the international airports. So I'm not saying that it could have precipitated in the spread of it, because I've got no evidence to prove that. But
Sure.
but in terms of the whole aspect of how information is then sent out through the government, sent out to the enforcing authorities like border control, like the health and safety executives, to ensure that they give a certain level of protection within society, to make sure that, because if you go to the HSE website, there's a plethora of information about COVID-19, and obviously they're getting a lot of their direction from the government, and they're also putting together their own information in terms of how they want different sectors to go forward with any specific regulation or guidance. And I know the government has said if you don't follow certain things, then you can be prosecuted. Whereas you said in Saudi Arabia, you have no choice. It's an autocratic society. It's run by the monarchy, and you have to do it. And therefore, the big difference between working in different territories and working in a Western society where people are asked to do something rather than told that they have to do something because it could save their lives. Whereas, with health and safety, if you tell somebody to do something on site, you're telling them to do it because it's going to potentially save their lives. Don't climb that gantry without a harness, because that could potentially mean that you could fall, and if you do fall, you could potentially harm yourself and others.